In higher ed, we're all looking for big wins, but reducing a 75% application abandonment rate and achieving a 90% conversion rate, that's next level transformation. Michael Bettersworth, CMO at Texas State Technical College, shares how they achieved this by streamlining the application process with Element 451.
Our Element journey began out of a necessity. We were switching to a new SIS, and the application process was going to pose some real usability issues for us. We felt that application was going to hamper our enrollment. So we began quickly to evaluate different CRMs, different applications. So for context on that, our conversion rate with the prior application had about 75% abandonment of people clicking apply to submit. And the first weeks after going live with Element, we saw an 80% conversion, and that's now up to 90. So improving the usability of that application on the front end process has had a significant advance in our intake.
When technology works for students, it works for you. Visit element451.com to see how simplifying the application process with artificial intelligence will lead to significant results for your institution.
I brought 4 books to the conversation. I know you're always an overachiever, so I'm assuming you brought 40, 45?
I brought 8 categories. I won't hit them all.
I nailed it.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your Monday morning energizer covering insights and trends in higher ed marketing and enrollment. I'm Mallory Wilsey, bringing over 15 years of edtech and marketing expertise to your earbuds.
And I'm Seth Odell, joining the Pulse with my own adventures from leading marketing at top universities to founding Kanahoma, one of the industry's fastest growing digital marketing agencies.
Each week, we bring you the kind of insider insights you typically only find over cocktails with your pals at a conference.
It's fast, it's fun, and it's designed for you, the busy higher ed professional.
You're not just listening to another podcast.
You're checking the pulse of higher education.
Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are here today to talk about books, and I just got a new bookshelf. I'm literally looking at it. I was finally able to stack up all my books, and it looks so pretty, and I finally have a way to display them. So I'm loving that this is our topic because I'm excited about my new bookshelf.
Me too. Well, I am a huge fan of books. I've read many, many, many. I used to have a wild collection. But something I don't know if I ever told you, Mallory. I used to have over 1,000 business and marketing books, and I actually donated all of them last year. And so I have 6 books that I own now. It's wild. Can I tell you why? It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, did you just buy them all on Kindle again? Were you just decluttering? What was the point?
No, I was doing a bunch of mindfulness work, and I went on this mindful leadership retreat, and I had this realization that I had this 1,000-book collection that was all marketing and business books, and I was reading a couple books a week, and I realized that I was reading them not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I wasn't good enough, and it was I had to read them to get prepared and to be better and to improve. And there was this limiting belief internally that I wasn't enough and I needed to do better. And so it felt like when I realized that, I was like, wow, did I even want to read all those books? And some of them I certainly did. And the ones we're going to have about today, I definitely did and I loved. But a lot of them was no, I didn't even want to read that. I'm then why did you spend all your time doing it? It's well, I thought that I needed to be better because I wasn't good enough at what I did. And so when I was looking around my office, when I got back from that trip, I was I'm just surrounded by this this weird memory of a limiting belief. And so I just boxed them all up and donated them all. And I kept maybe 6 or 7. And those are the ones I'm going to talk about today, are the few that stand out as just really kind of spotlights of books that I've learned a tremendous amount from. But yeah, that was my journey going from a very large library to the smallest book collection I think I've ever had in my life.
Thank you for sharing that and trusting this information with us and all of our listeners.
It feels like it's just me and you. I sometimes when people message me, I'm like, oh yeah, people do listen to this, but like, I don't know if people understand that. Like this show very much just feels like I'm FaceTiming with a friend, and then I'm like, oh, it pops back up on live, like, oh yeah, that's right, never mind, it just went out. Okay, that's like a thing. Everybody's listening.
Everyone knows my secret.
Maybe I'll feel that when this goes out too, but for now it feels like I'm FaceTiming with a friend, so it's totally fine.
Well, to keep our FaceTime going, we are here to talk about books today. In fact, books that specifically changed how we lead or approach leadership. So this is going to be one of those fun ones where Seth and I didn't share our lists with each other ahead of time, but I brought 4 books to the conversation. I know you're always an overachiever, so I'm assuming you brought 40, 45?
I brought 8 categories. I won't hit them all.
I nailed it. I knew it.
It's like 8 categories with subcategories. I bolded the few that I need to make sure to mention. So I will attempt brevity, and I am sure fail to achieve it.
Well, I'm going to let you go first.
Okay.
Because then, when we get to the end, it won't just be you listing off books.
You got it. Perfect. So I will go first. So I have to have my prequel in my book. So before I even start, I'll say Principles by Ray Dalio and Shoe Dog by Phil Knight are 2 that I give to everybody that ever works for me. I've mentioned that before on the podcast. So
You sure have.
they are honorable mentions. The first book I'll mention, I don't think I've ever talked about, which is called The Contrarian's Guide to Leadership by Stephen Sample. Former president.
I love that book.
It's so great, right? Former USC president. I had a chance to interview him 15 plus years ago. And it's really about breaking free of the bonds of conventional thinking. The reason I love it is not just is it a great way he reframes how you think about leadership, but it's all specific to his experience leading USC, University of Southern California. And so it just tied so well into my lived experience in higher ed. And so for you all listening, if you're interested in the leadership book, it's just really, really great. And it's just so contrary to many other things. Just the way he talks about one very tactical example is he's I never read the news. He's because I let everyone else filter my news, because if it's a big enough story, people will ask me about it. And then I'll be like, oh, tell me about it. And then they've summarized it. And he's so I just eliminated this whole need to ever consume news. And that is one that to this day, I don't really follow the news that much, because other people will bring it up. And if they bring it up, then I'll find out. And it's was such a simple tip, but it's just so great. So that's my first one.
I am dying because I almost put this book on my list.
Really?
That it was my biggest takeaway from reading that book too.
Was the news
and I
this?
literally do not pay attention. I do not have
No
notifications about news or anything. And I say, and it pisses my husband off. I know it because he pays attention to the news so much. I'm look, if something happens, you're going to tell me. I know you're going to tell me. I have freed up so much mental space
yes,
in
this
my
is
life.
wild, really. We've never
Crazy.
talked about this. That's
Oh my
awesome.
gosh. I am literally dying right now and staring at the book on my bookshelf.
Same.
It's so good.
I love it.
Oh God. This was the place to start. Everybody needs to go read that book. And shout out to Susan Evans, who I used to work with at M. Stoner.
She's wonderful.
She's a delight. I'm sure living her best retired life right now. But when she was mentoring me when I was at the agency, that was the book that we read together. And so shout out to her.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. What a
Great
start.
spot. I mean, we can just end the podcast now. That's it.
Let's just end on a high. Let's Costanza this thing and just we're out. That was good.
We're out. All right. Well, I'll jump in with my first recommendation. It's the book How to Be a Great Boss by Gino Wickman and Renee Bohr. And so in this book, there's this really great framework, and it's called Delegate and Elevate. And it's a tool. It's very simple. It's 4 quadrants, and you break everything you do up into the week into these quadrants. It's what you like to do and are good at, all the way to what you hate to do and aren't good at, and then kind of the 2 variations in between. So you do this exercise where you break up everything that you do at work into those 4 quadrants. And the point is, if you can offload the right stuff, particularly the things that fall into those bottom quadrants because they're not natural strengths of yours, you can elevate your own performance, but also that of your team. And that a delegation is a really big theme within this book. They say how to be a great boss is to understand how to delegate effectively, provide accountability, and then, also be able to nurture that talent. And so that tool has been just as meaningful in my life as the stop paying attention to news tip. It allows you to give your direct reports more meaningful work and feel better in the process because you are able to offload the things that maybe you're just not as good at.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. That's amazing. I've done an exercise similar to that, so I'll have to go back and read that book for sure. It sounds like a lot of value there. I love that. My next book is called The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins, and it is all about the first 90 days in a new job. And it is a book that I have gifted to so many people over my career when they are moving into a new role. And it provides a framework for what to do and how to get started. And you know, when you're entering a new role with a lot of pressure, there's so much internal angst, at least for me, of like, how do I execute fast? And it just provides an incredible framework for how to be really thoughtful and how to, you know, gain insights, build alignment, and execute correctly so your first 90 days set you up for success rather than set you back, which I think can so often be the case if you come out of the gate too hot.
My second book is The First 90 Days by Michael D. Watkins.
No way, is it? Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is the first time that's actually ever happened.
That's awesome. Well, tell me, why don't you tell me why you love that book too?
All right. Well, all the things you said, plus I think that there's a lot of different types of transitions. So it's not just entering, like maybe you're walking into a brand new institution in a very high level leadership position like a CMO, right? That is maybe a very obvious type of transition, but there's other types too. Like you may be elevated within the same institution, but you're moving to a different department. And so it's a totally new group of people. Or maybe you're being elevated within your unit and you're going from, you know, something like middle management up to the head of the department. And now all of a sudden you're managing your former peers. I really like how this book gets specific on how to adapt your approach to those first 90 days, depending on which situation you're in. And so they actually give you the transition roadmap tool to help you diagnose where the business is and then match your strategy, like taking the transition type that you're in to this kind of business framework and put the two together so that you can, you know, pretty much walk into that situation just being a whole lot more confident that what you're spending your time doing is the right stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely love that we have the same. That's so great. It's
too good.
I think it highlights it. That's definitely one that should be on everybody's shelf, especially if you're thinking about a new role. Struggling to make sense of endless research? At the AI Engage Summit, you'll get a hands-on tutorial and meet Notebook LM, Google's AI assistant that transforms complex information like academic papers and lecture videos into content that will engage your target audience. The event is free and virtual. Register now at enrollify.org/engage. Okay, my next one is my first category, is where I'm breaking the rules. I'm just going to say that, like, everything by Jim Collins. And everything is not the name of the book. It's more saying, like, everything Jim Collins has ever written. He wrote so many great business books, Good to Great, How the Mighty Fall, Built to Last, Great by Choice, Turning the Flywheel. Those are probably, like, my favorite 5. I think I've read 8 or 9 of his books. But if you're interested in just learning about, like, how businesses work and which businesses are successful and why, I just think you should, like, just Jim Collins is so fantastic. Probably start with Good to Great if you can. But I will say my 30-second anecdote is his very abbreviated book called Turning the Flywheel was actually at the heart of, like, how I've built Kanahoma. And he talks about building flywheels that grow themselves. And so we actually built a flywheel like I did when I first set out to build Kanahoma. And it is a 5-part flywheel. And it said, first, we position on premium. So even though we're like a new agency, we charge a lot, or at least a good amount. Because we charge a lot, then the second piece of the flywheel is that we can build a better team, so more talented people. More talented people, then the third part of the flywheel is drive better results. And those better results, then fourth part of the flywheel, build a reputation. And that reputation, then 5, drives organic interest. Because it's organic interest, we can then go back to 1, position on premium and charge a higher price. And it allows you to grow. And so, like, it's like really simple, but like the way he lays it out is just like so easy to consume and understand and apply. And so that was one that's been like literally at the heart of how I built my business. But like Jim Collins has come up probably a dozen times in business conversations over my career. And I just can't stress enough that, like, you should pick one of his books and give him a try.
Fantastic. I'm adding Jim Collins now. I wrote it down when you said it, like adding that to my reading list. And yeah, what's the one book people should start with? Good to Great?
Good to Great would probably be the best place to start for most folks.
All right. I'm buying it on Amazon tonight.
Love
All right. My third book is one that I picked up during my IMC program. It is called Financial Intelligence by Karen Berman and Joe Knight. And we've talked about this before, right? Like leaders, no matter where you are within an institution, like you need to understand the basics of financial decision making in order to guide your unit responsibly. And like I think it's really challenging on a campus because finance can sometimes be like this black box and and procurement drives things and all this stuff. But like if you're a leader who can grasp the nuances of financial data and like hang in the room with the CFO, like you are going to get so much farther in your career. And so I really appreciate that my IMC program required us to take this financial literacy class. And if you're a marketer, like this is really the perfect book for you because it's a little more entertaining to read. It's not super dry. And like after reading it, I felt like I knew things like how income statements, balance sheets, and like
Yeah.
cash flow statements all interact with each other and like why that matters. And I think in marketing, we talk about the art a lot. Well, these authors also talk about the art behind the numbers and how like to make judgment calls and estimates and contextualize things. So it's, sometimes it's about asking the right questions in order to like use those financial metrics to the best way. So yeah, it's a great read. It is a little more like academic-y, but I think the authors try hard to make it as entertaining as possible.
Very cool. No, I love it. I think the more we understand about business, the more we can communicate how our work impacts it. And the better we can do that, the more funding we'll get. And I found my own career, like the more I was able to bridge that conversation, just the more runway I had. So I love that. It's on my list. I'm definitely going to check that one out. Okay, next one I have is a twofer. It's Leading Change by an author, John Cotter, with an honorary mention of his other book, Sense of Urgency. In Leading Change, he maps out this like really easy to follow 8-step change model for organizations. And just if you are in a place that is not where it wants to be, like if you're in a mature, established organization and it's like, okay, your job is to dial it up 1 or 2 or 3%, probably not the book for you. But if you're coming to an organization where it's like, okay, wow, we have like incredible growth goals, or we're in the middle of a turnaround, this is like the first step is to stop and read John Cotter's Leading Change and just understand how to do change management in a really kind of system thinking approach. And so I would definitely encourage folks to check that book out.
Amazing. All right. And my last book is probably one that many listeners have read or are familiar with, but Seth Godin and anything he's written, put it on your list. But Linchpin, I mean, it is
that's the one.
Such
I totally
a
agree.
good book. And so why am I bringing it up right now when I bet a lot of us have read it? I actually encourage you to go reread it. And I think like a lot of the things that he talks about in that book really matter right now with artificial intelligence and how many people feel like they may be replaced by AI or that their work is changing very quickly. Seth, as you probably know, he kind of challenges the notion of being a cog in the machine and talks a lot about that even in a world of increasing automation, you have to be uniquely human. And that means being courageous and empathetic and creative. And, and we just talked a couple weeks ago about how AI and humans need to come together and collaborate. And it's like this human-centered strategy. AI can churn out the data and the forecast, but what to do with that relies on humans. And so I think, embracing what he calls as the artist mindset and letting that lizard brain be quiet and shipping your work, like all these really important things that he talks about in this book, I think matter more than ever in this year of AI agents and, this future that is going to be highly collaborative with AI.
Wow, I love that. And I think revisiting books is so important. I'm currently rereading a book called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell that was really helpful to me a couple of years ago and like how I am approaching. But like, the reality is like you miss stuff, certain waves too. So on one hand, like the world changes, and the other hand is like your world changes and your experience changes. And I love the idea of like, if a book is giving you a lot of value in the past, consider revisiting it. That is one that I've only read once. And you're right, through the lens that you've just kind of shared, I think that's got to get back on the list to revisit. So I love that. All right, well, I my list is officially done, Mallory. I'm just going to briefly speed read like the Micro Machine and just say honorable mentions: Ogilvy on Advertising, everything by Ryan Holiday, especially Ego is the Enemy and the Obstacle is the Way. I'm obsessed with biographies, everything from Steve Jobs to Warren Buffett, Ron Perlman, Laurie Segal were all really great reads that I think I learned a lot from. And then on a personal level, if you want to lead better, you got to be better. Pick up the Tao Te Ching. I think Stephen Mitchell's translation is the most powerful personally, and I'm going to stop there.
What is, this is off script, but what is the last book that you read?
Ooh, the last book that I read, gosh, that's a good question. I'm in the middle of a book called How to Make a Few $billion by Brad Jacobs. It's not that great, so I don't know if I would really, because I'm trying to think of the last book that I read that was really good. Probably the most recent book that I read was Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, was really, really wonderful. So if you're watching, I'm pulling it up, by Shunrui Suzuki. It's informal talks on Zen meditation and practice. I am still very early in my journey of understanding mindfulness. And so that's probably the last book I read that was like a book where you finish it and you got to sit for a little bit, if that makes sense.
Nice. I spent January anticipating the launch of Onyx Storm. If you're a Fourth Wing fan, you know the end of January could not come soon enough. So I spent January rereading the first 2 books in the series, and then consumed that third book within a couple days. I do not have the free time to plow through a book like I did with this one. But, for all my fiction fans out there, Fourth Wing is so good. It's so frustrating, but it's so good.
I have not checked it out, but maybe I'll need to with your endorsement.
You have to like dragons. That's all I'm going to say.
I mean, I don't dislike
You don't want to read
dragons.
about dragons.
I don't dislike them. I don't know if they make it to the top of my list, but okay. Good to know.
All right. So before we wrap, I do want to take a second to plug another really great read, the AI Playbook for Institutional Leaders. We break down AI adoption into 3 phases, and we actually give you checklists for each phase to follow. So intended to be very usable, print it out, work through it. It's basically like this quick start guide. And so if you're feeling like you're a little behind on AI adoption as 2025 is still fresh, this is the playbook to go and download. Everyone listening can find it on Enrollify's site. Just hop into the guides section in our navigation, and it is right at the top. And we'll drop a link in the show notes, not just to the playbook, but actually to many of the recommendations that we made today. So this was a fun one. I love it when we go back and forth, and I just I'm still chuckling about the fact that neither of us pay attention to news, and we both love the first 90 days. That's my takeaway.
Well, I guess there's a reason we're friends, right?
Right, exactly. But we're not keeping each other informed.
But it's not because we talk about what we're reading. Exactly. We're not friends because we talk about what we're reading, because clearly, as everyone listening knows, we clearly don't do that. We needed this episode more than anybody else, I think.
Apparently. Well, hopefully it was helpful to everyone as well. And folks, we are taking next week off. It is President's Day. I've got some PTO coming up. So we will see you back here in 2 weeks. Hope you have a wonderful long weekend, and talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye. The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea, and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.